Legendary Pokemon are some of the strongest and most iconic in the entire series. When talking about the best Pokemon, they tend to dominate the conversation. Mega Rayquaza, Primal Groudon, Xerneas, Calyrex, Zacian. These Pokemon took over the game and terrorized competitive players. But what if I told you that there's a legendary Pokemon that has never been good, despite being around since the very beginning? Even though it's a legendary Pokemon, Articuno was, well, bad. But in Scarlet and Violet, the Pokemon Company made one simple, unassuming change. Not even to Articuno, but to the worst weather condition. And this one little domino would eventually lead to Articuno winning a massive tournament. But before we can understand why Articuno is good now, we first need to break down what made it so bad for the first 8 generations of the series. Maybe you think I'm doing a little YouTuber exaggeration for the sake of making this a compelling video. Maybe Articuno wasn't bad per se, it was just mediocre. Well, why don't we take a look at the list of Articuno's results prior to Scarlet and Violet. When I say that Articuno was bad, I mean that Butterfree blows it out of the water by comparison. Butterfree! So, what makes Articuno so bad in the first place? Normally when a Pokemon is bad, it's because it's held back by its stats. But in Articuno's case, the stats actually aren't the issue. It's the typing. Combining Flying and Ice type is kinda like combining Chili and Ice Cream. You shouldn't do it. Looking at you, trailer. Defensively, you get stuck with weaknesses to some of the most common types in the game, and a double weakness to Rock, one of the most used types thanks to Rock Slide's wide distribution and high flinch chance. Not only do Flying and Ice land you with a bunch of unfortunate weaknesses, all you get in return is 2 lousy resistances and an immunity. And yeah, being immune to ground is nice, but resisting grass and bug, well, they aren't the first 2 types I'd personally choose to resist. What about offensively? Well, Ice and Flying are a little bit better. The only type in the game that resists both is Steel, which, let's be honest, resists everything anyway, and you hit 6 types for super effective damage. Or you would in theory. This is a good time to talk about Articuno's second weakness, its move pool. Articuno only gets 2 usable flying type attacks. Air Slash, a noticeably weaker move than most other attacks, and Hurricane, which has a measly 70% accuracy if the rain isn't up. So even though Ice and Flying are in theory decent offensively, Articuno doesn't really have a way to make use of its flying typing here. If Articuno only uses Ice type moves, the types that resist it go from just 1 to 4. But first, a word from our sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Bespoke Post. Bespoke Post is a monthly membership club delivering a box of awesome top shelf goods from under the radar brands. It's free to join and you can skip a month or cancel anytime. 90% of the products come from small brands, many of which are based right here in the US. Every month, they introduce their members to cool new products based on a preference quiz they fill out. They've got awesome clothes, cool stuff for your house, camping, and cooking gear. Basically, just high quality stuff in every category. They now offer a new membership program where you can get really great deals all year round. I'm talking like 30% off or more sometimes. And it's totally free to join. Preview your member shipment before it's sent. You'll get a customized selection of products picked for you, and before it's shipped, you can preview what's inside. Decide if you'd like to 1. Keep it, 2. Swap out products, or 3. Skip the month entirely for no charge. You only pay for what you want. Bespoke Post actually sent me a box, and I'm really happy with what I got. This is the destination box, which is super useful for me because I actually didn't have a good lightweight travel bag. And I also got sent the retreat box, which is great because I've been meaning to get a hammock. To get a free mystery gift with your first membership purchase, click the link in the description and enter WolfeyGift at checkout, or go to bespokepost.com/WolfeyGift. Thanks again to Bespoke Post for sponsoring this video. And remember how I said that Articuno's stats weren't the problem here? Well, that was kind of a lie. See, in a vacuum, Articuno's stats are actually quite good, mainly because it's so tanky. With a great special defense stat and above average HP and defense, Articuno has a lot of staying power. Or it would have a lot of staying power if not for the fact that its typing makes keeping it on the field a nightmare. By contrast, Articuno's typing really encourages it to be a fast and powerful special attacker. But Articuno's special attack stat is lower than Gastly's. Not Gengar's, though that's true too. Gastly's. And it isn't especially fast either. In fact, I'd say it's extremely middling, and unless you dump a ton of your stat points into speed, it's going to be slower than most other Pokemon you play against. In other words, Articuno's typing and stats are working directly against each other. each pulling it in a different direction, leaving it stuck in no man's land. But we haven't talked about its ability yet. There are plenty of Pokemon that would otherwise be awful that are saved by their ability after all. And both Zapdos and Moltres have strong hidden abilities that help them out. Surely it's the same for Articuno. Nope. Articuno has two abilities. Pressure, which is really only relevant if you think stalling until your opponent runs out of PP sounds fun, and Snow Cloak. Snow Cloak gives Articuno a boost to its evasion stat, but only works when the hail weather condition is on the field. And on the one hand, boosting your evasion is extremely scary. Sandvale Garchomp was a menace for years when paired with Tyranitar. But on the other hand, Snow Cloak is a lot worse than Sandvale. Sandstorm and Hail are two parallel weather conditions, where both damage every Pokemon that isn't a specific type at the end of each turn. The difference is that Rock, Steel, and Ground-type Pokemon are all unaffected by Sandstorm, making it easier to build a diverse team that isn't hurt by the weather. Whereas only Ice-type Pokemon are unaffected by Hail, meaning you need to use multiple Ice types, the worst defensive type in the game, to get value out of Hail. Add on to that the fact that Hail's secondary effect makes Blizzard 100% accurate, which is just worse than Sand giving Rock-type Pokemon a 50% boost to their special defense stat, and the Hail setters being across the board weaker than Tyranitar, and you can probably start to see why Snow Cloak isn't doing Articuno any favors. And this would have been the whole story of a frosty bird doomed to obscurity, if not for Scarlet and Violet. See, Pokemon noticed that both Ice types and Hail were really weak, and decided to kill two Corviknight with one max Rockfall, by changing the Hail weather condition to Snow. While Hail was Sand's counterpart due to the chip damage at the end of each turn, Snow instead does no damage but gives all Ice-type Pokemon a 50% boost to their defense stat, to mirror the Rock-type special defense boost in Sand. This might not sound like a big deal, and it wasn't exactly game-breaking, but it did take many Ice-type Pokemon from being completely unusable to actually having a niche. And one of those Ice types was Articuno. Oh, also, if you want to learn more about this buff and the other changes that Scarlet and Violet made to Ice-type Pokemon, you should check out this video I made, where I was able to talk about things super in-depth. Also, most of you aren't subscribed, so if you're enjoying the content and you want to see more of it, just do me a favor and double check. Odds are a lot of you think you're subscribed, but actually aren't. Anyway, Hail changed to Snow, and almost a year later, Articuno won a huge tournament. Let's talk about how this happened. On paper, all this change did was increase Articuno's already good physical defense stat in the snow. And while this is nice, it doesn't seem like such a huge buff that it would change everything for the Arctic Owl. But here's the thing, Snow synergizes super well with Articuno's toolkit. So even though it's technically just a weather change, it actually affects so much more. Let's go back to Articuno's ability, Snow Cloak, which gives Articuno a chance to dodge all moves if Snow is active. The chance specifically is 20% of whatever the attack's original accuracy was. So a move with 100% accuracy will miss 20% of the time. This ability becomes more valuable the tankier Articuno is. For example, if it took 2 attacks on average to KO Articuno when the weather was hail, with the change to Snow though, Articuno becomes much harder to get off the field. Let's say it takes, I don't know, 4 attacks on average if Snow is up? Well, that's twice as many chances for Snow Cloak to activate. Not to mention, not every attack Articuno can dodge is intended to do damage. Missing a Fake Out, a Parting Shot, or a Spore to try and slow down Articuno can be devastating. And the more damaging moves it takes to KO Articuno, the longer it sits on the field, the more chances you have to dodge attacks. And dodging attacks isn't the only thing Articuno can do. The other mechanic of Snow is that it makes Blizzard 100% accurate, and Blizzard is extremely powerful. A 110 base power move that hits both Pokemon is actually just like Kyogre's signature move, Origin Pulse, except Origin Pulse only has 85% accuracy and Blizzard never misses. Beyond just the damage though, what truly makes Blizzard terrifying is the secondary effect. Any Pokemon hit by Blizzard has a 10% chance to get frozen. Freeze is the single most broken status condition in the game, as once frozen, there's a chance you'll never thaw. Hitting 2 Pokemon with Blizzard gives a 19% chance to freeze one of them. And while 19% isn't like so high, the longer Articuno sits in the field, the more opportunities it has to use Blizzard, the more 19% chances it gets to roll, the higher the odds are that it'll get a freeze. Now, the freeze chance is all well and good, but didn't I say that Articuno's special attack stat was lacking? Am I saying that Articuno is only threatening if it freezes the opponent? No. See, because Snow makes Articuno so much tankier, it can afford to forego defensive tools in favor of offensive ones. specifically the Choice Specs item. This item increases the wearer's special attack stat by 50% in exchange for locking them into only using the first move they select until they switch out. On a Pokemon like Articuno, who mostly wants to click Blizzard anyway, the drawback feels minimal, but the benefit feels massive. But some Pokemon are incredibly tanky and don't mind taking even a Choice Specs boosted Blizzard. Is Articuno useless against these super tanks? Nope. See, Articuno sticking around is dangerous even in the face of Pokemon that don't care about Blizzard, thanks to its access to one of the most terrifying moves in the game, Sheer Cold. This move is a one-hit KO move, meaning it KOs anything it hits in, well, one hit. Well said, Wolf. Anyway, the downside of this move is that it's only 30% accurate, but that's only if you use it a single time. Since Articuno really only wants to use Sheer Cold against defensive Pokemon that can't get rid of it quickly, it can often launch multiple Sheer Colds against its foes, and the odds of hitting one Sheer Cold out of 2 is over 50%. The odds of hitting 1 out of 3 is 66%, and so on. So as you can see, even super defensive Pokemon aren't safe against Articuno. A huge part of the snow buff is it helping Articuno stay alive. But maybe it seems like I'm overselling this buff, as increasing one stat by 50% shouldn't change a Pokemon's survivability by that much, right? Well, actually, you are right. The snow buff isn't the only thing making Articuno tankier. Terastalization plays a role as well. Articuno's typing is just plain bad, and Terastalization allows it to change that. Articuno primarily runs a Terra type of Ice. It allows it to get rid of its double weakness to Rock, keep the defense boost in the snow, and get a boost to its Ice type moves as well. And the tournament winning Articuno ran 4 different Ice type attacks. While it does lose its resistances to Bug and Grass by doing this, like I said, this really isn't that big of a deal. So to recap, the change from Hail to Snow increased Articuno's overall survivability, which allowed Articuno to get much more value out of Snow Cloak, let it be run much more offensively, and also increase the odds of a Blizzard Freeze or Sheer Cold KO. On top of all of this, Terastalization increased Articuno's offense and defense, making it even harder to knock out. Is that the full story? No, we still have more to talk about. See, the change from Hail to Snow affected not just Articuno, but other Ice-type Pokemon as well. Specifically, the Ice-type Pokemon that can actually set the weather up with Snow Warning. I just gave you all Snow Warning for this pun. In Scarlet and Violet, only 2 Pokemon get this ability, and one is clearly superior, Alolan Ninetales. Before, stacking multiple Ice-type Pokemon on the same team felt really bad due to the benefit of Hail being relatively low impact, and the overlapping of weaknesses and problem Pokemon being difficult to get around. Now, the benefit is much greater, and with Terastalization, you have some tools to get around some of the defensive problems that come from using multiple Pokemon of the same type. Alolan Ninetales is a Fairy and Ice-type Pokemon that is relatively fast and sets the snow up with its ability. It can support Articuno's damage output with Helping Hand, or use Blizzard. And although it's not very strong, another Blizzard user means another chance to freeze. Being hit by 2 blizzards in a single turn, it's not something that you ever want to happen if you like your Pokemon to actually, I don't know, move. The best thing about Alolan Ninetales though is its access to one of the strongest moves in the game, Aurora Veil. Aurora Veil is a fusion of Reflect and Light Screen, which reduces all incoming damage by 1/3, but can only be set up in the snow. The move normally lasts for 5 turns, but with the Light Clay item, it'll last for 8, nearly the entire battle. This combos with other multipliers, meaning the Aurora Veil reduction and the Snow reduction combine to make Ice-type Pokemon unbelievably tanky. And both of these also work independently with Intimidate, lowering physical attackers' stats even more. To get a sense for how big a deal this actually is, let's take a look at a match from the Utrecht Regional Championships where Articuno eventually won. Articuno is staring down 2 of the strongest Pokemon in the game, Urshifu and Ogerpon Hearthflame. But Aurora Veil is up, Snow is up, and Arcanine can switch in.
Ivy Cudgel connecting down into the Articuno with the Intimidate out behind the Aurora Veil. Look at how little damage that takes. Wicked Blow is going to get the critical hit right through the Aurora Veil, but the Articuno benefiting from the Ice-type defense boost as well. That's Ogerpon down.
All these defensive tools only help to keep Articuno on the field for even longer, giving it more chances to dodge a crucial attack or pick up a game-changing freeze. The tournament-winning team had other Pokemon that could take advantage of Aurora Veil too, such as Assault Vest Raging Bolt, Choice Band Arcanine, Substitute Landorus Incarnate, and Follow Me Ogerpon. All these Pokemon benefit a ton from the increased survivability they gain from the Veil, meaning Ninetales could be used without Articuno, giving the team more depth. The real genius of this team, though, in my opinion, comes from the timing. Truly great teams aren't just about what Pokemon you use, it's about when you use them. Going into the Utrecht special event, a large European tournament, the conditions were just right for an Ice-type team to pop off. Raging Bolt usage was the highest it had been all formats, as was Landorus Incarnate. Both are often paired with Follow Me Ogerpon to help keep them safe, but Blizzard doesn't care about Follow Me. On top of that, Amoonguss and Rillaboom were being used on a large percentage of teams. Urshifu Water usage had plummeted, eliminating one of the main water types that, actually resist ice, and Urshifu Dark, who was taking its place, really didn't love losing its Focus Sash to Blizzard. Not to mention that critical hits don't ignore the defense boost from Snow. There were almost no Steel-type Pokemon being used apart from Goldengo and Kingambit, neither of which were especially popular, and both of which struggle against Landorus Incarnate and Arcanine, and the main Fire-type Pokemon was Incineroar, who could take Blizzards without too much worry, but who also couldn't remove Articuno or Ninetales very quickly. On top of all of this, the only real Ice-type Pokemon people had been using was Chen Pao, who is much easier to deal with due to its weakness to Intimidate and overall frailty. So teams could afford to use multiple Pokemon weak to Ice-type attacks because, well, there just weren't really that many Ice types. And one of the worst matchups for a team built around Aurora Veil and Snow are Pokemon that can change the weather, like Torkoal, Tyranitar, and Pelipper. But in the current format, none of these Pokemon are especially good. Pelipper and Torkoal are used on certain teams, but they haven't been having a ton of success, especially at the top level. In other words, almost no teams in the tournament had a way to overwrite the weather once it was set up. All of this contributed to the conditions being just right. And Articuno and Ninetales weren't on anybody's radar, meaning on top of them being well positioned generally, nobody knew how to play against them. The tournament was won by Nikhil Reddy, a player who's been playing for a long time but hasn't attended many in-person tournaments. Something I found really interesting about their run is that in all of their stream matches, they never got any of the secondary effects that make Articuno so threatening. No freezes, no Snowcloak misses, no sheer cold connects. This speaks to the power of Articuno, that they were able to win the tournament without it playing a role in many key sets. Of course, only a few of their games were on stream. I'm sure that these secondary effects were present during their run at one point or another. But Nikhil is just one person. Maybe this was a case of a player being extremely strong rather than a Pokemon actually being good. Well, even if we ignore the stream games where Articuno absolutely pops off, there's something I haven't told you yet. Nikhil wasn't the only Articuno in the top 8 of the tournament. There was another Articuno that finished 6th, with the same 6 Pokemon as Nikhil. And the team that eliminated this Articuno team from the tournament was the other Articuno team. If the bracket had shaped up differently, it's possible that there would have been an Articuno versus Articuno finals. Now, I don't personally think that Articuno is gonna take over the game or anything like that. Now that the bird's out of the cage, I would expect it to have a harder time as players build teams with it in mind and practice against it before going to large events. But I do think that from now on, Articuno will have a place in the metagame. And I wouldn't be shocked to see players who really believe in it find ways of making it look really good going forward. And as someone who really loves Pokemon, I just gotta say that it was really cool to watch as, for the first time in almost 30 years, Articuno truly looked legendary.